you clicked on this video to finally understand the real story behind Las Plagas, the ancient parasite at the center of Resident Evil 4. And you're in the right place. To understand why everything happened, we have to go back much further than the game ever shows us. What most players don't realize is that Las Plagas didn't begin with Sadler, or the village, or even the Salazar family. Its origins go back thousands of years, buried deep beneath a remote valley in Spain, sealed inside amber long before anyone even knew the parasite existed. And once you see where the Plagas came from, the entire storyline, the cult, the mutations, the kidnapping, the bioweapons, starts to make a lot more sense. There's a piece of history hidden beneath the castle that completely changes how you think about Resident Evil 4, and most people miss it entirely. So get comfortable, relax, and let's start from the very beginning, long before Leon ever set foot in that village. If you enjoy deep, calm, Resident Evil lore, feel free to subscribe. It helps me keep making these for you. Part 1. The ancient origins of Las Plagas. The horrific cycle of bioterror that plagues the world of Resident Evil is most frequently associated with the synthetic, man-made viral outbreak of the T virus and the G virus. But the parasitic threat known as Las Plagas, Spanish for the plagues, possesses a far more mysterious, disturbing, and deeply ancient origin. Unlike the laboratory-engineered viruses of the Umbrella Corporation, the Plagas are a product of natural, biological evolution, entombed for millions of years, before being violently awakened by the ruthless ambition of the Los Illuminados cult. The initial discovery and the geological evidence surrounding the parasite's origins are absolutely crucial to understanding its unique nature, its immense resilience, and its profound, lasting impact on the global BOW threat. The initial finding of the dormant parasites occurred in a remote, highly isolated rural valley of Spain, a region characterized by deep forests, towering mountains, and critically, extensive subterranean cave systems. These caves lay directly beneath the grounds where the imposing Salazar castle would eventually be constructed. The parasites were not found in the form of conventional spores or active biological matter, but preserved within massive, dense deposits of ancient amber, the fossilized tree resin that often preserves prehistoric life with astonishing clarity. The unique environmental conditions of the cave, likely a combination of low oxygen and mineral-rich sediment, allowed the resin to petrify over geological epochs, perfectly encasing the Plagas in a state of suspended animation. The geological age of these amber deposits is staggering, suggesting that Las Plagas are millions of years old, a biological life form that existed long before the dawn of human civilization in the Iberian Peninsula. The existence of a highly organized, complex parasite predating human history presents a significant scientific puzzle, immediately distinguishing it from the recent viral outbreaks caused by the progenitor virus. This age implies an evolutionary resilience and an inherent biological sophistication that far exceeds anything engineered in an Umbrella lab. The fact that the parasite could remain viable for such an immense span of time, merely waiting for the right conditions to reawaken, speaks to its status as a foundational, primal threat. Further evidence of the Plagas' ancient influence was found in the primitive artistic records left by the region's earliest human inhabitants. Within the deepest chambers of the caves, protected from the elements, the archaeologists found crude yet detailed cave art that depicted sacrificial rituals and figures interacting with a large, ominous, tree-like organism. This organism is believed to represent the massive centralized structure of a queen plaga, or a primary, fungal body responsible for producing and disseminating the initial spores. The depictions suggest that early human inhabitants of the valley were aware of the parasite's existence and, critically, had already begun to worship its power, performing elaborate rituals that likely involved human sacrifice to appease the biological entity, an early, dark precursor to the cult that would later emerge. The symbiotic relationship depicted in the cave art between the parasite and the early human population confirms that the area was not just a geological storage facility, but a place of ancient, sustained religious devotion and biological influence. The early inhabitants recognized the immense corrupting power of the parasite to control life and manipulate the mind, interpreting this biological function through a supernatural or divine lens. The Plagas were seen not as a pestilence, but as a god, a divine entity that demanded reverence and sacrifice in exchange for a terrifying form of enlightenment or power. The discovery of Las Plagas in amber thus establishes a terrifying biological precedent within the Resident Evil universe. It demonstrates that the world contains endemic, natural bioweapons that are far older and potentially more resilient than anything Spencer or Wesker ever created. The natural containment provided by the amber proved to be the only thing protecting humanity for millennia. The reawakening of the dormant Plagas in the modern era, facilitated by the ambition of Osmond Sadler and the misguided loyalty of Ramón Salazar, was not an accident of science, but the deliberate unearthing of a geological and spiritual catastrophe, setting the stage for the new, parasitic age of bioterror that would challenge the world's most experienced BOW operative, Leon S. Kennedy. Part 2. The History of Los Illuminados. The dark, fanatical organization known as Los Illuminados, which translates chillingly to the Enlightened Ones, is not a recent splinter group or a modern terrorist cell. It is a religious cult with roots that extend back through the centuries, intrinsically tied to the discovery and worship of the Las Plagas parasite. The cult's history provides the crucial human context for the eventual outbreak, demonstrating how a primal biological threat became weaponized by radical, dogmatic belief. The narrative of the cult is one of relentless devotion, ruthless suppression, and a final, catastrophic resurgence fueled by misplaced loyalty and modern ambition. The Los Illuminados cult originated in the same remote, isolated Spanish valley where the ancient Las Plagas were discovered. From its earliest inception, the cult's core ideology was built upon the veneration of these amber-encased parasites, viewing them not as biological organisms, but as divine power, a tangible manifestation of a greater cosmic will. This profound misconception shaped their entire belief system. They believed that to truly achieve spiritual devotion and enlightenment, one had to surrender their physical body and their very soul to the parasite, allowing the Plaga to integrate with them and guide their actions. This was considered the ultimate act of faith, a pathway to becoming enlightened and part of a collective consciousness. The cult's activities, particularly their public rituals and their proselytization, eventually drew the ire of the region's dominant religious authority, the Catholic faith. The Los Illuminados practices, which likely included human sacrifice as depicted in the ancient cave art, and the direct assimilation of a biological entity, were deemed not only heretical, but a direct threat to the established order and the spiritual well-being of the population. The cult's growing influence and its rejection of conventional religious dogma were perceived as a dangerous rebellion, leading to an inevitable, violent confrontation. Accounts of the exact date of this historical conflict vary, lost to the mists of time and the deliberate suppression of the cult's existence. However, the outcome is clear. the first castellan of the Salazar family, a powerful and devout lord who ruled the region from his newly constructed castle, led a brutal, uncompromising crusade to eradicate the cult. This was not merely a theological dispute, it was a military campaign aimed at physically destroying the Los Illuminados and permanently sealing away their blasphemous gods. The Castellans' forces systematically purged the valley of the cult's visible presence, executing its members and dismantling its places of worship. The most critical act of this crusade was the sealing of the leftover parasites. The Salazar forces meticulously gathered the remaining amber-encased plagas and buried them deep within the subterranean vaults and mine systems beneath the newly built castle grounds. This monumental task effectively wiped out the cult's public presence for centuries, turning the Los Illuminados into little more than a dark, forgotten legend, a chilling tale whispered only by the most ancient residents of the valley. For generations, the Salazar family took immense pride in their ancestors' righteous act, believing they had forever imprisoned a demonic force. However, the cult's ideology and its foundational texts, though driven underground, never truly died. Surviving remnants, or perhaps just the memory of their beliefs, persisted in the darkest corners of the region, passed down through secretive lineages, waiting for the opportune moment. The centuries of suppression merely forced the Los Illuminados into an invisible, enduring existence, allowing their fanaticism to fester and become even more extreme, culminating in the rise of a new prophet, Osmond Sadler, who would finally fulfill their ancient, terrible ambition. The history of Los Illuminados is a testament to the enduring power of belief, even when that belief is founded on the worship of a monstrous biological parasite. Part 3. Ramón Salazar's Bloodline and the Castle Legacy. The Salazar family and their imposing castle were more than just feudal rulers of a Spanish valley. They were the self-appointed, hereditary guardians against a primal evil, the Las Plagas parasite. For generations, the bloodline of the Salazar Castellans, counts or wardens, bore the immense responsibility of keeping the demons, as they referred to the parasites, sealed beneath their ancestral seat. This legacy of custodianship, however, would ultimately be broken by the final, tragic figure of the lineage, Ramón Salazar, whose vulnerability and misguided piety led directly to the unleashing of the very evil his ancestors fought so hard to contain. The foundation of this legacy was laid by the first Castellan, a formidable figure known to history as Count Gregorio, the Conqueror. It was Count Gregorio who, centuries ago, valiantly led the violent crusade against the original Los Illuminados cult. His forces successfully eradicated the cult's public presence, seeing their worship of the parasites as an abominable heresy and a direct threat to his dominion and faith. He was the one who initiated the monumental task of gathering the amber-encased plagas and ensuring they were buried deep within the earth, beneath the protective shadow of his newly constructed castle. His actions established the Salazar family as righteous protectors, heroes who had saved the region from a dark spiritual corruption. Following Count Gregorio, the task of permanent containment fell to his successor, the second Castellan, Count Ippolito, the Sealer. It was Ippolito who finished the immense, arduous task of constructing the elaborate, reinforced subterranean vaults and passages designed to permanently seal the caves where the plagas lay dormant. This engineering feat was a testament to the family's dedication, an architectural promise to future generations that the demonic parasites would remain imprisoned forever. For hundreds of years, this sacred responsibility was diligently passed down from one Castellan to the next, a generational burden that ensured the Las Plagas remained buried, forgotten by most, but guarded with unwavering vigilance by the Salazar bloodline. However, the passage of centuries, combined with a gradual decline in the family's direct involvement in the region's broader affairs, began to erode the fierce resolve of the earlier Castellans. By the time the 8th Castellan, the young and intensely isolated Ramón Salazar, inherited the castle, the weight of this ancient legacy had become distorted. Ramón was a solitary figure, prone to eccentricity, insecurity, and a deep, almost childlike naivety, despite his aristocratic title. He had grown up steeped in the lore of his family's glorious past, but his understanding was warped by his own vulnerabilities and a fervent, almost desperate desire for spiritual significance. It was this profound psychological and emotional vulnerability that made Ramón Salazar an ideal target for manipulation by Osmond Sadler, the charismatic and ruthless leader of the resurrected Los Illuminados cult. Sadler, with his cunning intellect and his deep understanding of human psychology, saw in Ramón the perfect tool to undo centuries of Salazar guardianship. Sadler exploited Ramon's isolation and his deep-seated guilt, subtly twisting the historical narrative. He convinced Ramón that his ancestors had not performed a righteous act, but had instead committed a grave sin by banishing the cult and suppressing their true god, the Las Plagas. Sadler painted a picture of Ramon's ancestors as misguided persecutors, denying the world true enlightenment. He argued that it was Ramon's divine duty, his sacred act of atonement, to right this ancient wrong. This manipulation was incredibly effective. Ramón Salazar, eager for spiritual redemption and swayed by Sadler's persuasive rhetoric, made the fateful, catastrophic decision to unseal the ancient mines and vaults, deliberately undoing the painstaking work of his forefathers. This act of misguided piety, born from a manipulation of his family's very legacy, directly led to the reawakening of the dormant Las Plagas, unleashing a biological and spiritual catastrophe that the Salazar bloodline had sworn for centuries to prevent. Ramón Salazar, the last of his line, became the unwitting architect of the very disaster he was sworn to guard against, turning his family's proud legacy into a dark testament to hubris and deception. Part 4. Sadler's Rise to Power and Cult Reformation. The resurgence of the Los Illuminados cult from centuries of dormancy was not a random act of fate, but the meticulously orchestrated plan of one man, Osmond Sadler. He was not merely a figurehead, he was the charismatic, ruthless, and highly intelligent current leader and prophet of the cult, a man who combined profound theological conviction with a deep understanding of biological manipulation. Sadler's rise to power and his subsequent reformation of the Los Illuminados cult are central to the Las Plagas outbreak, demonstrating how an ancient faith could be weaponized with modern science to achieve a terrifying vision of global domination. Sadler's first, most crucial step in his plan was to exploit the profound vulnerability of Ramón Salazar, the isolated and religiously guilt-ridden 8th Castellan of the castle. Sadler, with his persuasive rhetoric and manipulative charm, systematically converted Ramón to the cause of Los Illuminados. He convinced the young Castellan that his ancestors had committed a grievous sin by suppressing the cult and burying the divine Las Plagas, and that it was Ramon's sacred duty to atone for these historical wrongs by reawakening the ancient power. This conversion was a masterstroke, granting Sadler immediate access to immense resources and a vital, historical claim to the very land where the Plagas lay dormant. With Ramón Salazar firmly under his influence, Sadler leveraged the Castellans' inherited wealth and status to formally and publicly rebuild the cult. no longer confined to secretive, whispered rites. Los Illuminados emerged from the shadows, attracting new followers, with promises of spiritual enlightenment and a connection to ancient power. Ramon's castle, once a fortress against the cult, became its new headquarters, its ancient halls now resonating with the sermons of Osmond Sadler and the zealous devotion of his new adherents. The surrounding rural villages, isolated and impoverished, proved fertile ground for Sadler's recruitment efforts, as he offered a sense of purpose and belonging to those disenfranchised by modern society. Sadler's ultimate manipulation of Ramón was convincing him to unseal the mines beneath the castle, an act Ramón believed was a holy atonement. This decision was the true turning point in the cult's history and the beginning of the Las Plagas catastrophe. The unsealing allowed Sadler to finally gain physical access to the ancient amber deposits containing the dormant parasites. With the parasites now accessible, Sadler's plan shifted from mere religious reformation to active biological weaponization. He began the process of reawakening the dormant Las Plagas and initiating his terrifying plan for global domination, a vision that combined ancient dogma with a modern, bioengineered army. Sadler's control over his new, infected army was absolute, thanks to his personal assimilation of a dominant species plaga. This highly advanced strain of the parasite allowed him to exert full telepathic control over any individual infected with the lesser, subordinate plagas. This created a powerful, unified hive mind, where Sadler was the undisputed absolute ruler, or lord, of the cult. Those infected with the subordinate plagas, known chillingly as Ganados, cattle in Spanish, were stripped of their free will, their minds becoming mere extensions of Sadler's consciousness, allowing him to direct them with terrifying precision and unity. Osmond Sadler's rise was a chilling demonstration of how a charismatic leader could exploit religious fervor and ancient biological power. He transformed a forgotten cult into a formidable, bioengineered force, ready to unleash a new form of terror upon the world. His personal control over the Las Plagas hive mind made him an unprecedented threat, turning an entire region into his personal army and laboratory, setting the stage for the desperate mission of Leon S. Kennedy to rescue Ashley Graham and dismantle this terrifying, resurrected biological empire. Part 5. Excavation of the Plagas and Early Experiments. The reawakening of the Las Plagas parasite and the subsequent transformation of the quiet Spanish Valley into a nightmarish biological hot zone began with the seemingly innocuous act of excavation. Once Osmond Sadler had manipulated Ramón Salazar into unsealing the ancient mines beneath the castle, the physical process of unearthing the dormant parasites commenced. This act, however, was fraught with immediate and unforeseen biological consequences, turning the very workers hired for the excavation into the first unwitting victims and the initial test subjects for Sadler's horrific biological experiments. Ramón Salazar, acting under Sadler's guidance, hired local village workers to undertake the dangerous and laborious task of excavating the parasites from the deep, ancient mines. These miners, unaware of the profound biological threat they were disturbing, toiled within the subterranean caverns, gradually chipping away at the massive amber deposits. Within these amber formations, they discovered what appeared to be mummified or fossilized remains of the plagas, the desiccated, dormant forms of the parasite that had been perfectly preserved for millions of years. This initial finding confirmed the ancient nature of the parasites and provided Sadler with his primary resource. The crucial turning point came when the workers inadvertently breathed in the airborne plaga spores that were contained within these ancient remains. Despite being dormant for eons, the highly resilient spores were released into the confined, dusty air of the mines. As the amber was disturbed and the fossilized parasites crumbled, these microscopic spores, inhaled deeply into the lungs of the unsuspecting villagers, began a terrifying internal biological process. Over time, as the spores incubated within their bodies, they matured into full-grown, living plagas, actively seeking to integrate with the host's central nervous systems. This was the silent, insidious genesis of the outbreak that would soon consume the entire region, transforming its inhabitants into the monstrous Ganados. With the region now effectively his personal laboratory, Osmond Sadler wasted no time in capitalizing on this accidental infection. He began to systematically study the plagas and their effects on the human body, transforming the infected villagers into his unwitting test subjects. To accelerate his research and refine the parasitic strains, Sadler hired a team of dedicated, often morally compromised researchers. Among them was Luis Serra, a brilliant native of the Spanish village who would later attempt to atone for his involvement by aiding Leon S. Kennedy. These scientists were tasked with unraveling the complex biology of the plaga, understanding its life cycle, its methods of control, and, most critically, how to manipulate its genetic structure. The primary goal of this early experimental phase was to develop differentiated and controllable plaga strains. Sadler successfully refined the parasite, creating the powerful dominant plaga strain, which he assimilated into himself. This dominant strain granted him absolute telepathic control over those infected with the lesser, subordinate plagas. He also implanted dominant plagas into his key lieutenants, Ramón Salazar, the village chief Bitores Mendez, and the mercenary Jack Krauser, ensuring their unwavering loyalty and granting them a share of the hive mind's power. The vast majority of the infected villagers, however, received the subordinate plaga, transforming them into the subservient, mind-controlled Ganados, literally cattle in the cult's terrifying terminology. The excavation and early experiments of Las Plagas were therefore not just acts of scientific discovery. They were the intentional, systematic process of biological weaponization. Sadler's ruthless exploitation of the parasite's ancient power and his methodical refinement of its strains created a terrifying, self-propagating army, a unified hive mind under his absolute control. The quiet Spanish Valley became the breeding ground for a new era of biological warfare, where the lines between ancient religious dogma and cutting-edge, parasitic manipulation blurred into a single, horrifying reality. Part 6. The Ganado Transformation Process. The true horror of Osmond Sadler's parasitic regime was not merely the revival of an ancient cult, but the systematic, biological transformation of an entire rural population into the terrifying, mind-controlled soldiers known as the Ganados. This process, distinct from the viral infections seen in other Resident Evil games, created a unique type of bioorganic weapon that was both deceptively intelligent and utterly subservient to the will of the Los Illuminados leader. Understanding the mechanics of the Ganado transformation is crucial to grasping the insidious power of Las Plagas and the profound threat they posed to Leon S. Kennedy. The villagers of Valdalobos, the isolated region surrounding Salazar's castle, were primarily transformed into the Ganados through the most insidious and inescapable means: the inhalation of airborne plaga spores. As detailed in the excavation phase, the disturbance of the ancient amber deposits in the mines released microscopic spores into the air. These spores, unknowingly breathed in by the local workers and subsequently dispersed throughout the village via wind and direct contact, became the primary vector of infection. Once inside the human body, these spores began a slow, insidious incubation period, gradually maturing into a fully developed, adult parasite within the host's torso. Unlike the immediate, destructive cellular necrosis of the tvorshus that creates shambling zombies, the plaga works by integrating with the host's nervous system. This integration grants the infected individuals several horrific new capabilities. Firstly, the Ganados exhibit significantly enhanced strength and durability, capable of shrugging off injuries that would incapacitate an uninfected human. They can absorb multiple gunshots, withstand blunt force trauma, and continue their relentless pursuit, making them far more resilient than conventional human enemies. Secondly, and most critically, the parasite causes an almost complete loss of free will, connecting the host's mind to the powerful hive mind controlled by Osmond Sadler's dominant plaga. This means that every Ganado acts as an extension of Sadler's will, their every action dictated by their lord. Despite this loss of free will, the Ganados retain a deceptive, unsettling appearance of intelligence and basic motor functions. They are not mindless creatures. They are capable of using a variety of tools and weapons, ranging from pitchforks and axes to chainsaws and dynamite. They can also engage in rudimentary communication, shouting commands or warnings to each other in Spanish. This combination of retained function and parasitic control makes them incredibly dangerous. They are strategically coordinated by Sadler, capable of setting ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and overwhelming an opponent through sheer numbers and organized aggression. This superficial intelligence, however, masks the horrifying truth that they are nothing more than biological puppets, their humanity utterly subsumed by the parasite. The most visceral and terrifying manifestation of the plaga's control occurs when a Ganado host sustains enough damage. Instead of simply dying, the parasite actively defends itself and its hive mind. The plaga emerges violently from the host's neck area, typically bursting through the skin as a monstrous, chitinous appendage. These emerging plagas can take various forms, such as the blade, like Cephalo, the scorpion, like Magini, a later evolution of the parasite, or other grotesque mutations. This emergence transforms the already formidable Ganado into an even more lethal threat, capable of extended reach, powerful strikes, and a more direct, aggressive defense. This secondary mutation is a physical manifestation of the parasite's direct control, demonstrating its ability to rapidly adapt and protect its collective. The Ganado transformation process was therefore the fundamental engine of Los Illuminados' power. It created a vast, resilient, and utterly loyal army that could withstand conventional attacks and overwhelm any resistance through sheer numbers and coordinated terror. The parasitic nature of their control, their deceptive intelligence, and their grotesque secondary mutations made them a wholly unique and terrifying threat, forcing Leon S. Kennedy to adapt his combat strategies against an enemy unlike any bioorganic weapon he had ever encountered before. Part 7. Leon Kennedy and the Presidential Assignment. 6 years after his harrowing escape from the Raccoon City disaster in September 1998, Leon S. Kennedy was no longer the fresh-faced rookie police officer. The traumatic events of that apocalyptic night had irrevocably shaped him, forging him into an elite, highly skilled, and uniquely experienced operative for the United States government. This transformation from a naive law enforcer to a hardened federal agent made him the ideal, indeed the only, choice for a mission of immense sensitivity and global consequence. The rescue of the president's kidnapped daughter, Ashley Graham, from a remote, hostile, and biologically corrupted region of Spain. Following the Raccoon City incident, Leon was immediately recruited by the US government. His first-hand experience with the virus, and the machinations of the Umbrella Corporation made him an invaluable asset. He underwent intensive, specialized training in combat, espionage, and BOW countermeasures, rapidly ascending through the ranks to become a special agent under the direct command of the president. His expertise was not just theoretical. He had survived the very worst of biological warfare, giving him a unique, practical understanding of bioorganic threats that no amount of training could replicate. This made him an unparalleled resource for situations that went beyond conventional military or intelligence operations. It was precisely due to his unique and intimate experience dealing with bioorganic weapons and viral outbreaks that Leon was chosen for this particularly sensitive off-the-books assignment. The abduction of the president's daughter was not a typical kidnapping. The intelligence suggested a highly organized, ideologically driven group with access to unconventional methods. A military assault risked escalating the situation and harming Ashley, while a conventional intelligence operation lacked the necessary expertise to handle a potential biological threat. Leon's specialized background made him the ideal, highly specialized operative, a discreet, capable, and lethal asset who could operate effectively in hostile environments without triggering an international incident. His assignment was clear, though veiled in extreme secrecy: the rescue of the president's kidnapped daughter, Ashley Graham, who was believed to be held captive in a remote, rural area of Spain. The mission was explicitly off the books, meaning it would not involve official military deployment or public acknowledgement, protecting the president from political fallout and preventing the kidnappers from leveraging their captive on a global stage. Leon was dispatched as a lone wolf, relying on his training, his instincts, and his unique understanding of unconventional threats to achieve his objective. Critically, Leon's history made him uniquely qualified to face the new, non-viral, parasitic threat of the Las Plagas. While his past experience was primarily with viruses, his training as a BOW expert extended to all forms of bioorganic weapons. The intelligence gathered about the group holding Ashley, the Los Illuminados, hinted at biological manipulation that was distinct from the familiar viral contagions. Leon possessed the analytical skills to adapt to an entirely new type of infection, recognizing the patterns of biological control and mutation, even if the specific mechanism, the parasite, was unfamiliar. His experience with mind-altering viruses, grotesque mutations, and the sheer ruthlessness of bioweapons organizations prepared him for the insidious, hive mind control exerted by Las Plagas. He was a veteran of the biological wars, and the president trusted him with the most important mission of his presidency, sending him into the heart of an ancient, reawakened terror. Part 8. Ashley Graham's Kidnapping and the Plan for Global Domination. The desperate mission undertaken by Leon S. Kennedy, the rescue of Ashley Graham, was not the result of a random act of criminality, but the highly calculated, essential centerpiece of Osman Sadler's plan for world domination. The kidnapping represented the culmination of centuries of Los Illuminados devotion and modern biological weaponization, designed to leverage the immense power of the Las Plagas parasite to seize control of the world's most powerful nation. The details of Ashley's abduction and her critical role in Sadler's endgame reveal the frightening political scope of the cult's ambitions. Ashley Graham, the daughter of the President of the United States, was abducted while performing a mundane, routine act, returning home from college. This kidnapping was executed with extreme precision, highlighting the cult's logistical capabilities and the reach of Osman Sadler's network outside of rural Spain. The target was deliberately high profile, not for ransom, but for political leverage and biological vectoring. The selection of Ashley was a strategic masterstroke by Sadler, designed to maximize the impact of the Las Plagas infection and ensure the swift, silent overthrow of Western power structures. The very purpose of her abduction was to serve as a biological delivery mechanism. Sadler had no interest in simple financial gain or political concessions. His ambition was to achieve absolute spiritual and biological control over the world, starting at the highest level. His plan was cold, elegant, and horrifyingly simple. He intended to infect Ashley with a dominant species plaga, the same highly refined, highly controlling strain, assimilated by Sadler himself and his most trusted lieutenants, like Ramón Salazar and Jack Krauser. This dominant plaga was to be implanted within her body and allowed to mature, granting the cult a strategic asset of unparalleled value. Following the successful implantation and maturation of the plaga, Sadler planned to return Ashley to the United States. The timing was critical. The parasite would be actively integrated, but not yet outwardly manifesting as a visible BOW, allowing her to pass through security protocols and re-enter the private world of the presidential residence. Once returned, Ashley, now completely under the telepathic control of the Los Illuminados hive mind and carrying the potent dominant plaga, would then be compelled to infect her father, the president, likely through a secondary viral or spore release vector that Sadler's researchers, including Serra, would have engineered. The successful infection of the president would immediately place the highest office of the United States under the direct, unquestioning command of Osman Sadler from his base in Spain. This was the ultimate act of parasitic global domination, controlling a superpower not through military invasion or political maneuvering, but through silent, biological manipulation. With the US government compromised and under the direction of the Los Illuminados hive mind, Sadler could then leverage American resources, military might, and political influence to spread his influence globally, facilitating the infection of other world leaders and key figures, effectively creating a global network of subservient Ganados at the highest echelons of power. Ashley Graham's kidnapping therefore underscores the profound difference between the parasitic threat of Las Plagas and the viral threats of the Umbrella Corporation. While Umbrella sought to profit from bioweapons and create a eugenics-driven society through force, Sadler sought a religious, ideological domination through subtle, parasitic control. Ashley was not merely a victim. She was the critical, living link in a chain of command designed to turn the world's governing bodies into the ultimate, globally coordinated Ganado force. Her rescue was not just a personal mission for Leon S. Kennedy, but a desperate race to dismantle the single most dangerous political and biological threat the world had faced since the collapse of Umbrella itself. Part 9. Serra and his researcher, Redemption, Arc. The twisted morality and pervasive guilt surrounding the Las Plagas project are nowhere more evident than in the tragic story of Serra. A brilliant scientist native to the very Spanish village that became the epicenter of the outbreak, Luis was instrumental in the project's biological success. However, his moral crisis and subsequent defection to aid Leon S. Kennedy represent a desperate, late attempt at redemption in the face of absolute horror, confirming that not all scientific minds involved in the Los Illuminados scheme were devoid of conscience. Serra was a native of the affected Spanish village of Valdelobos and possessed a formidable scientific intellect, making him a prize recruit for Osman Sadler. He was a brilliant, albeit morally compromised researcher, who was lured into the employ of the cult to work directly on the Plagas project. His expertise in biology and genetics was critical, particularly in the early stages of refinement. Luis was deeply instrumental in perfecting the Plaga strains, helping to differentiate the dominant and subordinate types, and fully understanding their complex biology, their reproductive cycles, nervous system integration, and methods of spore transmission. Without Luis Serra's scientific contributions, Sadler's ability to create a controllable, refined parasitic army would have been significantly delayed or impossible. However, as the project progressed, the true, grotesque reality of the Los Illuminados' atrocities became impossible for Luis to ignore. He was consumed by profound guilt at the atrocities the cult committed, witnessing firsthand how his scientific breakthroughs were used to enslave and mutate his own people, the residents of his home village. This moral conflict fueled his determination to escape his past and undermine Sadler's operation. He recognized that his knowledge, which had facilitated the horror, was the only thing capable of ending it. Luis quickly realized that the primary danger to the victims, including the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, was the maturing parasite. He began to secretly work on developing a removal method for the plaga, a chemical or radiation-based process that could extract the parasite without killing the human host. This clandestine work was highly dangerous, as he was constantly under the surveillance of the deeply paranoid Osmond Sadler and his dominant infected lieutenants. Luis's attempt to create a cure was his final, desperate act of atonement for the scientific sins he had committed. During Leon Kennedy's infiltration of the region, Luis took enormous risks to aid the US agent, providing crucial information about the nature of the parasite, the structure of the Los Illuminados cult, and the specific weaknesses of the Ganados. He also established contact with another agent operating in the area, Ada Wong. Ada, who was secretly working for Albert Wesker to retrieve a plaga sample, used Luis as a source of information and a temporary ally. Luis delivered a vital sample of the dominant plaga to Ada, hoping that by exposing the cult's technology, others could help defeat Sadler. Tragically, Luis's efforts toward redemption were cut short. Before he could fully refine the removal method or provide enough comprehensive data to Leon and Ada, he was brutally killed by Osmond Sadler. Sadler, recognizing Luis's betrayal, struck him down, ensuring that the critical, comprehensive knowledge needed to easily counter the plagas was destroyed. Luis Serra's death confirmed the ruthless nature of the cult and deprived Leon of his most crucial scientific ally. However, the fragments of his research, including the sample he gave to Ada and the thermal scope technology he left behind, proved instrumental in the mission's eventual success, cementing his legacy not as a collaborator, but as a martyr in the fight against parasitic terror. Part 10. Jack Krauser, Soldier, Betrayer, and Plagas, Host. The complex layers of betrayal and power lust within the Los Illuminados cult are best exemplified by the figure of Jack Krauser, a former comrade of Leon S. Kennedy who descended into fanaticism and bio-augmentation. Krauser's transformation from a skilled US military soldier into a devoted Plagas host and one of Osmond Sadler's primary lieutenants highlights the seductive allure of biological power and the dangers of disillusionment with established authority. Jack Krauser was an elite US military soldier and a highly skilled operative. Crucially, he had previously worked alongside Leon Kennedy during a covert operation codenamed Operation Javier in 2002, a mission in South America involving the T virus and the T. Veronica virus. During this mission, Krauser sustained a severe injury, and his experience there combined with the US government's ineffective handling of the Umbrella Corporation and other subsequent bioterror events, shattered his faith in conventional power structures. Krauser grew intensely cynical, feeling that the government and the military were too weak to handle the existential threat of bioorganic weapons. He concluded that true power lay not in service to the state, but in mastering the biological weapons themselves. Driven by this ideological shift and a desperate need for power and purpose, Krauser faked his death following Operation Javier to pursue his new agenda. He eventually fell in with the shadowy network of Albert Wesker, who had survived the collapse of Umbrella and was orchestrating his own global schemes from the shadows. Krauser initially served as Wesker's mercenary, undertaking missions that allowed him to train and evolve his combat skills. Wesker, recognizing Krauser's ruthlessness and ambition, provided him with support and a prototype virus, likely a variant of the virus or its derivative, that granted him limited, enhanced abilities. However, Krauser felt this was insufficient for the power he craved. Krauser's path eventually led him to Osman Sadler's organization in Spain, where he was initially planted as a mercenary to retrieve a Plaga sample for Wesker. However, upon witnessing the absolute, centralized control and immense physical power offered by the dominant Plaga, Krauser chose a path of ultimate betrayal. He assimilated a dominant Plaga sample from Sadler, integrating the powerful parasite into his own body. This was a critical turning point, as he was no longer merely Wesker's spy or Sadler's employee. He was a full-fledged, biologically augmented member of the Los Illuminados hive mind, second only to Sadler himself. The assimilation of the dominant Plaga granted Krauser extraordinary strength and resilience, far surpassing the effects of his prototype virus. His body began a process of terrifying mutation, culminating in his grotesque winged mutation, a massive, bony, scythe-like appendage that extended from his arm, giving him lethal offensive capability and an intimidating, monstrous appearance. This physical transformation reflected his complete surrender to the parasite's power and his final rejection of his former humanity and allegiances. Krauser became one of the primary antagonists to Leon Kennedy during the mission, establishing a powerful and deeply personal rivalry. Their conflict was fueled not just by opposing mission objectives, but by their shared past and Krauser's desire to prove his superior ideology of power. Krauser's choice to embrace the Plaga's control cemented his role as a soldier turned bio-organic weapon, an agent of chaos whose ambition mirrored that of Wesker, demonstrating that the lure of ultimate biological power could corrupt even the most hardened and skilled military operative. His story served as a dark counterpoint to Leon's journey, highlighting the moral boundaries that Leon refused to cross in the eternal fight against BOW threats. Part 11. The Castle Experiments. Verdugo, El Gigante, and Novistadors. The immense ancient castle and the surrounding structures, financed by the vast wealth of the misguided Ramón Salazar, served as the sprawling, horrific laboratory for the Los Illuminados cult. The funds provided by Salazar allowed Osman Sadler to move far beyond simple control of the Ganados and delve into extreme, sophisticated BOW research focused entirely on exploiting the transformative properties of Las Plagas. This era of experimentation produced a series of grotesque and highly specialized bioweapons designed to defend the cult's fortress and eliminate trespassers, showcasing the Plaga's versatility in creating threats across the animal kingdom. The cult's research spanned three main types of advanced Plagas-based bioweapons encountered by Leon Kennedy within the castle grounds and surrounding facilities. Firstly, the El Gigante, the giant, experiments focused on brute, overwhelming strength. These creatures were massive, simple humanoids, infected with an extremely powerful, specialized strain of the subordinate plaga. The parasite's function in this case was to induce massive, uncontrolled growth and muscular hypertrophy, resulting in creatures of immense size and destructive capability. Their design was purely for physical combat, lacking the specialized traits of other BOWs, but providing a devastating form of shock and awe. The El Gigante served as powerful guards and destroyers, capable of leveling entire structures with their brute strength, proving the Plaga could amplify human hosts far beyond their natural limits for simple combat effectiveness. Secondly, the sewers, waterways, and deep cave systems of the castle were home to the Novistadors, the unseen. These creatures represented the Plaga's ability to infect insect-like hosts, manipulating them into specialized forms. The Novistadors were insect-like BOWs bred in the dark, damp environments of the castle's infrastructure. Their unique, terrifying characteristic was their near-invisibility abilities, achieved through the manipulation of light refraction via a sophisticated biological camouflage developed by the parasite. They could remain almost perfectly hidden until they struck, making the claustrophobic underground tunnels a deadly maze. The Novistadors demonstrated the cult's ability to diversify the Plaga into non-human hosts, creating highly adapted biological soldiers for environments where human Ganados could not operate effectively. Thirdly, and perhaps most terrifyingly, were the Verdugos, the executioners. These were the highly specialized personal bodyguards of Sadler and Salazar, elite BOWs engineered for speed, stealth, and lethal efficiency. The Verdugos were created through a process that fused human DNA with insectoid plagas, resulting in armored, highly resilient creatures. Their design incorporated thick, segmented exoskeleton armor and long, razor-sharp tails for offense, turning them into nightmarish, agile hunters. The creation of the Verdugos showcased the pinnacle of Los Illuminados mixed organism bioengineering. Their primary function was to execute traitors and eliminate high-priority targets, acting as living manifestations of the cult's absolute authority within the castle grounds. The extreme resilience and speed of the Verdugos forced Leon Kennedy to use environmental manipulation, often freezing them temporarily, to overcome their biological superiority. These highly funded, ethically non-existent experiments underscore the sheer scale of Osmond Sadler's ambition. Unlike the chaotic, accidental mutations of early viral outbreaks, the Las Plagas BOWs were customized, highly specialized weapons designed for specific tactical functions, ranging from the brute force of the El Gigante to the stealth of the Novistadors and the execution efficiency of the Verdugos. The castle was not just a home for Ramón Salazar. It was the ultimate proving ground for a new, parasitical form of global bio-warfare. Part 12. The Island Facility, Regeneradors, and Iron Maidens. As Leon S. Kennedy's mission progressed deeper into Los Illuminados territory, he discovered the existence of the Island Facility, a remote, highly fortified research site, distinct from the castle and the village. This island served as the secretive, ultimate destination for the cult's most horrific and advanced biological experiments, where the limits of the Las Plagas parasite were pushed to their most extreme and terrifying capabilities. The key creations of this island lab were the Regeneradors and their more dangerous variants, monsters that tested Leon's tactical skills and required highly specific, advanced weaponry to defeat. The island facility was focused on generating BOWs with unparalleled durability and self-repair capabilities. The result of this research was the Regenerators, creatures defined by their truly incredible regenerative abilities. These organisms were created by a complex and agonizing process, implanting multiple Plaga embryos, typically 3 to 5, into a single human host body. The sheer number of parasites allowed for redundant systems of biological self-repair, granting the Regeneradors the ability to heal almost instantly from any conventional wound, including massive blunt trauma or severing injuries. A simple gunshot or explosion would only temporarily disrupt them before the tissues rapidly knitted themselves back together. Defeating a Regenerador was impossible using standard ammunition or brute force. The creature could only be killed by destroying all the implanted parasites within its body simultaneously. This strategic weakness required Leon Kennedy to utilize specialized technology, a thermal scope, which could be attached to his rifle. The thermal scope allowed Leon to see the parasites, small, pulsating organic masses, hidden deep inside the Regenerador's tissue. Only by systematically locating and destroying these internal plagas could the host body be fully neutralized. This mechanic forced the player to engage in a terrifying game of precision and patience, transforming the Regenerador into one of the most intellectually and tactically challenging BOWs Leon had ever faced. The horrific nature of the experiments was further exemplified by the creation of the Iron Maidens. The Iron Maidens were a further mutation and evolution of the base Regenerador. While they shared the same incredible regenerative abilities and required the thermal scope for destruction, the Iron Maidens were implanted with an even higher number of Plaga embryos, resulting in a more vicious, heavily mutated host body. The distinguishing feature of the Iron Maidens was the proliferation of added spikes, long, bony, metallic-looking protrusions that erupted from their skin and spine. These spikes not only made them physically more dangerous in close-quarters combat, but showcased the complete, uncontrolled breakdown of the host's body under the extreme stress of multiple parasite implantations. The island facility represented the culmination of Osmond Sadler's ambition to create an invincible army. The research conducted there transcended mere control. It focused on creating BOWs that were almost immortal, designed to withstand any conventional counterattack. The sheer audacity and depravity of implanting multiple parasites into single hosts, resulting in the grotesque forms of the Regeneradors and Iron Maidens, demonstrated the horrific extent of Los Illuminados' science and their complete disregard for human life in the pursuit of absolute biological superiority. The island facility was not just a lab, it was a factory of true, unstoppable biological terror, forcing Leon to rely on cutting-edge countermeasures to survive. Part 13. Sadler's final form and the end of Los Illuminados. The escalating conflict between Leon S. Kennedy and the Los Illuminados cult reached its inevitable and explosive climax on the remote island facility. This final confrontation focused on the absolute ruler of the hive mind, Osmond Sadler, whose final, terrifying mutation revealed the full, destructive power of the dominant Plaga and led to the definitive collapsing end of the cult's reign of terror. The final sequence of the confrontation was set into motion immediately after Ashley Graham was successfully cured of the subordinate Plaga that had been implanted in her. The removal of the parasite from the president's daughter deprived Sadler of his key political and biological vector, forcing him to abandon his strategic plan for subtle global domination and resort to brute force. Enraged by the loss of his most critical asset and the destruction of his research facilities, Sadler decided to eliminate Leon personally, demonstrating the absolute physical power he possessed as the Lord of the Hive Mind. The ultimate showdown between Leon and Sadler occurred at the island's dock, a strategically important location near the facility's escape route. This environment provided a dramatic backdrop for the final boss fight, emphasizing the desperate nature of Leon's fight for survival and escape. During the confrontation, Sadler reveals the true power of his dominant Plaga. Unlike the common Ganados, or his lieutenants like Krauser and Salazar, whose mutations were contained or structurally focused, Sadler's mutation was massive and catastrophic. He transformed into a large, multi-limbed, grotesque bow creature, whose body was a massive fusion of organic material, Plaga tissue, and bone structure. Sadler's final form was a horrifying spectacle of parasitic power. The transformation was swift, mutating his body into a hulking, spider-like behemoth, capable of immense speed, powerful attacks, and an astonishing amount of resilience. The body of the Lord Plaga became the centerpiece, emphasizing the direct, devastating effect of the dominant strain when fully unleashed. This final battle tested every aspect of Leon Kennedy's combat training and resilience, requiring him to exploit the environment and Sadler's few structural weaknesses to survive the onslaught. The turning point and the definitive end of the battle occurred through the intervention of a critical ally, Ada Wong. Ada, who had been secretly observing the climax, fulfilling her mission to retrieve a Plaga sample for Albert Wesker, intervened at the last possible moment. Recognizing that Leon was moments away from being overwhelmed, Ada utilized her training and specialized gear, launching a rocket-propelled grenade launcher directly to Leon. Leon seized the opportunity, utilizing the RPG, the ultimate symbol of anti-bow firepower, to deal the final, decisive blow. The destruction of Osmond Sadler, the host of the Lord Plaga, was not just the end of the cult leader. It was the biological annihilation of the entire hive mind. Because Sadler's dominant Plaga served as the central consciousness for all other infected individuals in the valley and the island, the death of the Lord Plaga immediately collapsed the entire Los Illuminados hive mind. All subordinate Ganados and infected creatures instantly died or became brain dead. Their lives extinguished the moment their central command was destroyed. This catastrophic collapse demonstrated the unique nature of the Plaga's threat. A single, surgical strike could end an entire biological army, unlike the decentralized contagion of the virus. The eradication of Sadler and the subsequent collapse of the hive mind marked the decisive end of the Los Illuminados cult and the immediate threat posed by the Las Plagas parasite in Spain. Part 14. Aftermath. Removal of Plagas. US cover-up and future implications. The finale. The battle was won, the hive mind was silenced, and the Los Illuminados cult was physically dismantled. But the aftermath of the Las Plagas incident in Spain was far-reaching, shaping global counter-bioterror policy and directly setting the stage for future threats orchestrated by Albert Wesker. This finale details the immediate escape, the political fallout, and the terrifying biological inheritance left behind by Osmond Sadler. In the immediate wake of Sadler's destruction and the collapse of the hive mind, Leon S. Kennedy and Ashley Graham made their final, desperate escape from the destroyed island facility. They utilized a high-speed jet ski provided by Ada Wong to race away from the exploding compound, leaving the burning wreckage of the cult's research behind them. They successfully returned to US custody, marking the successful completion of Leon's presidential assignment. Ashley was safe, and the immediate threat of the Los Illuminados infecting the president had been neutralized. Upon their return, the repercussions were swift, politically motivated, and comprehensive. The US government covered up the entire incident, minimizing the official narrative and keeping the existence of the sophisticated non-viral Las Plagas a closely guarded state secret. This was done to avoid mass public panic, prevent rival nations from exploiting the new BOW technology and ensure the political stability of the presidency. The public narrative focused on a simple kidnapping plot foiled by a specialized agent, completely omitting the truth about the ancient parasite, the massive scale of the Ganado transformation, and the final, catastrophic mutation of Osmond Sadler. The only remaining loose thread that directly impacted future events was the clandestine mission of Ada Wong. Despite the chaos, Ada successfully retrieved a sample of the dominant plaga from the destroyed facility, fulfilling her original mandate from Albert Wesker. This sample, a highly refined, biologically supreme strain of the parasite, was an invaluable asset. Wesker, now operating as a shadowy global terrorist financier following the collapse of the Umbrella Corporation, utilized this parasitic technology and the data gathered from the Los Illuminados experiments to continue funding and developing his own apocalyptic bioweapons research. The fusion of the Plagas technology with Wesker's existing knowledge of the progenitor virus and its derivatives proved critical. The sophisticated level of hive mind control and the resilience offered by the dominant plaga were integrated into Wesker's ultimate goal: the creation of the Ouroboros virus, the apocalyptic strain designed to force human evolution and purge the weak. Thus, the legacy of Las Plagas directly impacted the Resident Evil timeline long after Sadler's death. The technology retrieved by Ada funded Wesker's operations and provided him with the necessary genetic material and insight into parasitic control that directly enabled the creation and eventual unleashing of the Ouroboros virus in Resident Evil 5. The Las Plagas incident, while a terrifying detour from the viral outbreaks, proved that the threat of bioorganic weapons was not limited to the laboratory, nor did it end with the dissolution of the Umbrella Corporation. It established a terrifying precedent for ancient, naturally occurring bioweapons, and showed how dedicated fanatics could leverage them for global conquest. Leon Kennedy had survived another major event, solidifying his role as the world's foremost anti-Bawu operative. But the retrieval of the Plaga sample ensured that the seeds of the next, and arguably most devastating, biological catastrophe were already sown, leaving the final chapter of the Bioterror saga to unfold under the command of the true surviving architect of fear, Albert Wesker.